All right, good evening. My name is Shannon Brown. I'm the Supervisor of Special Education for the district, for those of you who don't know me. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'd like to just start off by recognizing some of our Unionville friends that are here. Leah Ryder, the Director of Special Ed, is to my left. Rudy Reif, one of the assistant principals at Unionville High School, is here. And we have a huge contingency of our teachers here tonight, which is exciting. We have a Chad's Ford crew in the back, ladies. I want to say hello to some of our special education and IST teachers. And then we have a psychologist and 2 special ed teachers from the middle school. So welcome, ladies. And then I'm sure you'll see him throughout the night because we always need lots of help from him. Ryan is here from District Office Technology, who's been putting everything together for us. So thanks, Ryan. I also just want to say thank you. We have 2 NHS volunteers out there babysitting tonight. So the boys asked if we hear your children that we run and check on them, but I think they'll be fine. It's unusual that we have 2 boys and 2 male students babysitting, but I think they will be great. So I'm totally joking. Don't anybody worry about your children. And Mr. Reif said he would step in and babysit if needed, so we're covered. So I just want to point out there is an agenda for this evening. It's over on the right there with all of those other exciting handouts that we have that I mentioned before. So make sure you take a peek at what's over there. Just want to introduce in a minute, speaking this evening will be Dr. Albert Friedman, who is here to talk to us tonight about talking to your children about their learning differences. So we're really excited to have him here. And his son is a graduate of ours, so he'll talk about that tonight, and that's also very exciting. I want to make sure also that everyone is aware of our website. And now it's gigantic on me, but here's our website. Let me make it smaller. It was smaller a minute ago. If you just go to ucfsd.org and then /U-PRISE, and if you can't remember that, you should grab a handy dandy pen or post-it note that's over there on the wall. On here, we post all of our meetings. We have links to the articles. We have a Twitter if you want to follow us. We have the sign-in where you can RSVP in advance for meetings and if you think you'll be utilizing babysitting. The biggest piece that we have is our community resources. We update regularly, so I would encourage you to reference this website and check it often. We're constantly updating things that are going on in the area through all different agencies, communities, vendors, anyone that reaches out to us and is willing to share their information, we're usually willing to post it on the website. So there's lots of great resources here. All different ones. So scroll through camps, conferences, parent support groups, grandparent support groups, free or special nights for kids with disabilities, transition fairs, you name it, it's on here. So I want to make sure you know that. And then also if you ever miss a meeting or you're not able to attend or you want to see a past meeting that you heard about, maybe we had one on social skills last year or executive functioning that you didn't catch, they're all here. They're all recaps. So you can go back and watch any of those videos and then moving forward, you can see any of the videos from this year. So you can see the September one is already posted where we talked about understanding special education processes. And just one final shout out, if you're interested in being on the advisory, actually I have 2 shout outs, I lied. If you're interested in being a part of the advisory committee, our next meeting is just right before the November 9th meeting. So in the same room, and we do give you pizza. That's a huge incentive, right? If you have any insight, we're going to be planning speaker series for next year already. And so if you know anyone or you have any ideas, feel free to come to advisory committee or shoot us an email or give me a phone call, okay? And I was looking around. We do have at least 1 parent liaison here. Do we have any other parent liaisons here? 2. We have 2 parent liaisons here. As I look around the room and see you, ladies, sorry. So I'm just going to have them introduce themselves and say which school they are a parent liaison for. I was trying to pull the screen up. If you go to the community resources page, at the very top are our school parent liaisons from U-PRISE. And so if you ever had a question or a concern or something that you didn't want to come directly to us or you weren't comfortable going to your principal or you just want to talk to another parent, these parents are sort of the reps for their building from U-PRISE. So Toshi, would you like to introduce yourself? Hi. This is Toshi Schwitter. She's the rep for Patton Middle School. And then Cecile Airways, if you want to say hi. Did I say your name correctly? Cecile is the Unionville High School parent liaison. So whenever they're here, I always try and introduce them. I don't think any of our elementary friends are here tonight. I don't think so. No. Okay. So just know, and these all link to their emails. Okay. I think that's all the announcements, right? Did I miss anything? Okay. All right. So then I will turn it over to Dr. Friedman to talk to you tonight. All right, Dr. Friedman, and here's the clicker.
All right. Thank you. Hi, everybody. You can call me Al. First name kind of guy. I'm here to talk about talking with children about their learning differences. I'm usually more mobile, but I need to stay near this, so I'm going to do my best to sit still. And my apologies if I'm interrupted by my phone because of my own special needs child. I have to leave it on. I want to tell you a little bit about me and how I came to this work and to the knowledge I'll be sharing with you and the perspective I'll be sharing with you. I'm a practicing child and family psychologist currently. I see kids and families in Westchester and in Ardmore. That's my day-to-day work. And I began in my 20s as a classroom teacher nearby here. And I taught elementary school for about 8 years, second and third grade, when I was very young. And along the way, I had my share of kids with special needs in the classroom. I went back to school partway through my teaching time and had excellent training in reading and learning and language disabilities at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I was very lucky to have that opportunity 25, 30 some years ago with some people who really knew their stuff. Upon getting my doctorate, I worked for some years at Delaware Valley Friends School, which is a local Quaker school that serves kids with learning differences. So through my teaching time and my professional work, I've had the opportunity to cross paths with many children and many families who, like us, are challenged by differences in one way or another. The reason that I am focusing my time with you tonight on this topic is because, as you know, as we know, there's always much discussion between adults about children when it comes to special education and special needs and differences. Parents talk with teachers, and teachers talk with administrators, and professionals talk with parents, and a lot of us adults talk with each other, but children aren't included as directly sometimes, and it's hard to know when and how to include children in the conversation about their special needs. So the purpose of my time with you tonight is to focus on kids' own understanding of their differences and how we can all help them to understand their differences. When I talk tonight, I have just about 6 or 7 slides with text. The things that I'm going to say are not going to apply to everybody. As we all know, our kids are all different from each other, and their differences are different from each other, and the ages of our kids are different from each other. So one size does not fit all. So the points I make tonight may be all of them should be relevant to somebody in the room, but they won't all be relevant to everybody in the room. So we'll get rolling here. Let's see if this thing works. Oh, and if I'm surprised, it's because my wife is someone who knows how to do PowerPoint, and I'm not, so she made these things jump like this. That's why I'm saying, whoa, what's next? To my young clients, I'm Dr. Al, but I'm also Dad Al. And the young man you see in this photograph is my son Jack, who Shannon alluded to. And Jack is now 22 years old and a graduate of this high school, Pocopson Elementary, starting in 4th grade, and then through Patton and here at Unionville High School through the age of 21. And he finished June before last. So I'm like you. I'm a parent of a child with special needs and very complicated special needs, and I want you to know that about me, because when I speak with parents, I'm one of you. I tossed in because I've done this presentation at a couple of other school districts for parents in groups, but because here at Unionville. I threw in a couple of extra pictures to indulge myself and as a way to acknowledge the wonderful work that was done for so many years with my son here at Unionville. This is Jack back in, I believe, 8th grade. I think that was the last time they take group photographs. And Jack's there with his one-on-one person, Mrs. Salisbury. And I think that's Mrs. Battenarian on the left. It's not fully focused, my apologies. She was the homeroom teacher. It was a wonderful experience for Jack to be part of the group. And in spite of the many challenges he has faced, he was made to feel a part of the group, was a part of the group here, and still feels a part of the group here. And I'm very grateful for that. I dug this one up. This is the University of Delaware. When your kids graduate, you'll be in a big arena senior year, and that was my son with his classmates getting his diploma. A very special day and a bittersweet day for us, because as soon as Jack finished here, then we don't have the support services and all the things that come with an education that came from the school district. So I'm very that was hard, because we've had a new chapter after 21 for Jack that has been a transition that's presented new challenges to us. Jack, by the way, has a muscle disease, if you're wondering, called spinal muscular atrophy, and we're very lucky to have him, and he's now working. The other handout that was on the table, Jack was able to get a part-time job at Westtown School up the road where I used to be a teacher, and they published this story about Jack because he grew up on the campus, and now he's a part-time employee there using his specially designed computer that reads design movements to help the business office crank out Excel spreadsheets. He's doing very well with that, and he learned how to do that because of his experience here at Unionville, and he was offered that equipment here at Unionville. So I'm very thankful. Wanted to tell you that I'm a dad too, and wanted to acknowledge Leah and Shannon and Rudy back there, who I've got to know very, very well for obvious reasons, and very grateful for all the support they offered my son along the way. I'm a satisfied customer. So I want to starting now with some of the content that I want to present. I wanted to start with a little story. When I was working at Delaware Valley Friends School as a consulting psychologist, there was an admissions visit that was set up, and the parent called me ahead about her son who was struggling mightily in the school where he was attending. And she asked me in her initial phone call a question that I thought was a little unusual. She asked me if the school had any signs or any posters displayed on the walls that identified the program as a school for kids with learning disabilities. And I asked her why she wanted to know this. And Mom said, well, my son doesn't know that he has a learning disability, and we don't really want him to know yet. And I talked with her a little bit and let her know that her son already does know. Kids who learn differently know that they're learning differently. They know it intuitively. They know it based on how they are experiencing the learning process compared to their friends and their peers, and sometimes they're very confused by it. So I tried to help this mom to get more comfortable with being more explicit about the conversation with her son as she was coming into a school that serves kids like her son. And he did attend, and he did learn a lot about himself and how he was different, which helped him to feel better about himself. Because when kids are helped to understand that they have something that has a name and it's identifiable and it's common and it's measurable and it's treatable, it brings comfort to the child who is often confused before having that information. The tricky part is figuring out how and when to talk to a child about their differences. While I'm talking, by the way, feel free to chime in, raise your hand. Don't raise your hand, call out. I'm pretty informal here. I'm not used to this formality. I have a lot of toys in my office, and I just cleaned up blocks before I came here on the floor. So why will talking about all of this be helpful? Again, kids are confused without an explanation, and they're frustrated if they don't have solutions to the problems they're having. Not talking about this sometimes causes kids, especially younger kids, to just assume that they must be dumb. I hear that in my office occasionally. I must be dumb, Dr. Al, because I'm not getting my work done and I'm not getting good grades like my friends. And trying to bring a little more explanation to the child, even a younger child, helps them to feel better supported and less confused. Explanations help. When we have a child who's physically ill with a condition like asthma or diabetes, we never hesitate to talk to our children about those types of conditions. They need to understand why they're struggling physically or medically, and as they get older, we educate kids about that. This is philosophically, to me, no different. The conditions in learning environments are more subtle than when you can't breathe or your blood sugars are off. But we always explain physical conditions to our kids, so why not talk with our kids about this? When kids are confused and they lack information about their situation and they continue to be frustrated and struggle, it's hard for kids to sustain their motivation. Much harder. And over time, when kids try and try and try, and despite their best efforts, they make no progress or little progress, and they're not understanding why it's hard, they will sometimes give up. So our role is to demystify the child's experience as much as possible. To demystify. Kids tell me all the time that they're relieved when Dr. Al helps them to understand that the challenge you're having has a name, and that it's treatable, and that they're not the only child who has had this problem. When I talk with kids about whatever kind of challenge you're having, it helps them to know whether it's a learning disability or anxiety or a death in the family. It's very important for kids to know they're not alone and that they're going to be okay and they're going to receive help. And this is an understandable and solvable problem. How and when should I talk with my child about their differences? First, informally. What not to do is to say, we're going to have a big meeting tonight about your learning disability. Kids, it doesn't go so well. Informally works better than formally. And gradually, rather than all at once, think of your child as an empty bucket, and you want them to be filled with this knowledge about themselves and about their experience and their difference, but you don't want to pour that all in at once. A little at a time as they get older and as the opportunities arise. And yeah, spontaneously as situations arise, kids will be more motivated and engaged in a conversation about themselves and their differences when it's relevant to them. So when they're having a challenge with schoolwork, if they have a learning disability and situation arises, there may be an opportunity to touch on this. Always honestly, and when your child asks a question related to his disability or difference, kids will ask. Kids will ask a little at a time. Kids will ask when they're confused. And when you're talking about complicated stuff, it's always helpful to bring it up when your child brings it up in response to their needs, in response to their desire, in response to their interests, in response to their struggles. Sometimes kids will come into my office and say, Dr. Al, could you tell Mom and Dad that I understand why they want to talk with me about blank, but not while I'm in the middle of my football game, right? It's an okay topic, wrong time. Kids do want to know. Kids want to know when they want to know. very important when you talk with your kids about their differences to remind them that whatever struggles they're having are not their fault. Kids, because especially with learning issues, kids feel that they're not cutting it. They're not getting the grades. They're not getting their work done. They're not meeting the expectations of their parents or their teachers. And they feel badly about that, and they often are confused about that. And naturally, who else could be fault? Who else could be at fault besides the child? So that's their default mode. And it's important when you talk with your child about their differences that you always remind them that this challenge is not anything that they've done wrong. It's not their fault. Especially for younger children, metaphors help. The race I put in there as a cue for me to remind myself of an example of a metaphor. Younger kids, when they're having a hard time with schoolwork, are helped to understand learning differences by understanding that it's okay if they get from the starting line to the finish line. They finished the race, and they finished it successfully. And you don't have to be the first one to the finish line. You can take as much time as you need to get to the finish line, learn what you're learning as you're learning it, and you might take a different route. It might not be straight ahead. It might be a zigzag. It might be a different route than others are taking in the race. But to get to the finish line, however you need to get there, is very appropriate. It's an example of a metaphor you can use to help your child feel more comfortable with their learning style or their difference. And some kids learn unevenly, and they're confused by, why is it so easy for my friends to do this? Why is it so easy for me in math and hard in reading? Using metaphors to help them and understanding there are different routes to get from the start to the finish, and the fastest time isn't necessarily what we're looking for here. It's an example. What should I say? Always first emphasize your child's strengths. Whenever you talk with your child about their challenges, start with their strengths. Every time I meet a new family in my office, I ask parents to tell me first about their child's strengths, no matter why they're in the room. I know they're not in the room because of their child's strengths. People don't come to Dr. Al when things are going well. People come to Dr. Al when things are not going well. But I like to hear strengths first, and I like to have parents present to me a balanced picture of their child. First, their strengths, and then the challenges that they're experiencing and the kind of help they're looking for. And then when children come in the room with their parents, session 2, I have parents do the same thing in front of the child. So the child always hears first something positive. And we all have strengths, and all of us have strengths. We all have areas that are harder for us. It's always beneficial to start with strengths. I'll explain what a learning difference is and what it isn't. Clarify misconceptions. Kids don't understand what learning differences are until it's explained to them. It's hard for all of us adults to understand what learning differences are. I've had kids in my office tell me that they'll never read, that they're stupid, that I have a learning disability, Dr. Al, but it's going to go away in middle school. I have a learning disability, Dr. Al, and I might have caught it from somebody. It's a misconception. The kids don't know why they're different, and they need to have it explained to them what a learning difference is and what it is not. And you'd be surprised if you listen up. I have a unique luxury in my kind of work to have this kind of communication with kids. You'd be surprised at the kinds of things kids believe about themselves and differences and learning differences. Support and reassurance goes a long way. This is a problem that we can solve. If it's a problem, your difference is a problem we can solve. I'm here to help you and reassure your child that despite the fact that they're banging their head against the wall to get their math homework done, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Stay as positive as you can, even in the face of adversity. it goes a long way. Remind your child that he has a strong support system of adults who truly care. I will often ask kids, who cares about you? Who can help you with this? Who's on your side? And I hear lots about parents and teachers and grandparents and extended family members and coaches and other people and Uncle Jim and people in the child's life who they look up to and who are in their corner and who they know they can count on. And because when you're a child in a classroom with a learning disability or any kind of disability, you feel by yourself. You feel alone if you're the kid who's last to get his work done. You're the kid that gets in trouble because he forgets his work. You're the kid who can't do what everybody else can do as easily. You feel alone. So the concrete reminder that there are a whole bunch of people who are in your child's corner is very helpful and reassuring to kids. Optimism goes a long way too. We can do this. Can go a very long way. I can tell you from my personal experience with my son that there have been a lot of challenges with him from when he was very young, a lot of medical challenges, a lot of medical instability, and optimism has been very important. And it is important to any child, any family facing any kind of challenge. The more optimistic you can be while being realistic, the better for your child. Some of these things are obvious, but I found both personally and professionally that you got to blow the dust off them sometimes when you're faced with adversity and you're tired and things aren't going well. Did you know that I had a hard time with math too? Did you know that Uncle John had a hard time when he went to school? Did you know that Mom had a real hard time with Spanish class in high school? The children I work with appreciate the honesty about their parents and other adults in their lives' own challenges that are similar to theirs, because kids see that their family members, adult family members, have been successful in spite of those challenges. And a lot of kids don't know that Uncle John has a learning disability and struggled in school. So as comfortable as we are as adults sharing that experience that we've had with our kids, it can help kids to feel supported. And it's especially helpful when there's an adult who's had a similar challenge themselves who can relate to the child's struggle and who's close enough to the child to be able to talk with them about that. I really had a hard time with this too. It happens all the time in my office. And it goes a long way for the kids to know that others that they look up to and have been successful have overcome whatever the challenges are. I've used the phrase differences or disability or learning disability. Kids who are gifted are also different. It's a different kind of difference. And I have a slide here to speak to those differences for the gifted child. And the gifted children I work with are often uneven, let's say, very, very overdeveloped in one way, and sometimes less developed in another way. But they're different regardless. Here are a couple comments on gifted. Gifted is just a word. It doesn't mean someone is better than someone else. That's important for all of us to remind ourselves, and it's important for the young child who's identified as gifted to be reminded of that. Gifted is a word that's given to kids who have different learning needs. Kids who are gifted do have different learning needs than the average child, and gifted is a word to characterize that difference. When you're talking with your child, some factual information. You took some tests, and based on the tests, you were found to be gifted. So you're being offered this specialized instruction to support your gifts and to support your learning needs. Your learning needs are a little different than some of your friends. This is another form of special education. Our children are all special. Gifted children are special in ways that are different than other children with special needs. Giftedness is something that's part of you, part of who you are. Giftedness comes in all shapes and sizes. Kids can be gifted in one area. Kids can be gifted in math. Kids can be gifted in language and reading and writing. Kids can be gifted in all kinds of different ways. There's not one kind of gifted. Uh-oh. Good thing our tech man's still in the house. What do you think's happening? I'm not sure what's next. That looks like that's next.
There we go.
It is, thank you.
Had a few extra clicks in there, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Is it working?
Oh, is that, oh, it's just extra clicks.
It
Sorry
might
about
be.
that. Got it. I'll tell my wife. Lots of kids I work with are identified as kids who need something special or something different. And knowing that they qualify for the services doesn't mean that the child wants the services. So sometimes it takes a little encouragement to have a child accept the services that are being offered. It's not automatic. And many kids, especially teenagers, are allergic to the idea of special education because they don't want to look different from their peers. This is most acute in middle school, in my experience. Kids are hypersensitive to being singled out as different. For parents, learning as much as you can about the services that are offered first. It's not easy as parents. We get these big printouts with the IEPs, and it's a lot of pages and a lot of print, and it's until you get familiar with that format hard to sift through to find what the services are that are being offered. Important to talk with your school staff and teachers about that so you know what is being offered. In addition to all those pages of print, we parents who have special needs kids don't have a whole lot of time to go reading anything, so it's hard to keep up with it. But as much as you can learn about what's being offered, the easier it is to talk to your child about it. If your child's reluctant, talk to folks at school who can help you, because they're going to tell you that your child's not the first one or the only one who's been reluctant. Let's give it a try. I can't tell you how many kids in my office over 20 years have been pretty obstinate about receiving extra help. And let's give it a try and see how it goes is often the way to get started. And with the reassurance to the child that if what is being offered to you isn't helpful or isn't productive, then it'll be reconsidered and you'll be a part of that discussion. Provide feedback to school staff as accommodations are initiated. Sometimes teachers and parents have different information and feedback from the child about the accommodations that are offered and how they're going. It's especially important early in the process when it's new. Give it time and evaluate. Give it time is important because some accommodations and special programs take time for the child and teacher to get traction and get to know each other. And children who are resistant often don't want to give it too much time. But once you get them started, let's give it a try. You try to help them accept the help that's being offered and have them see that it is helpful to them, and then reevaluate it and fine-tune as you go. This is what I did with my son here for all these years. Tried a son with very unusual needs, and we had unusual accommodations, and a lot of them worked really well, some of them didn't, but we tried them and evaluated them and then adjusted as needed very successfully. What children say. So when I originally was preparing a different version of this presentation for another parent group, I asked some kids in my office. I told them I was going to be talking to some parents about this topic. What would you like them to know? What do you think would be helpful for parents to hear? I asked kids who had learning differences especially, here are a couple of things that I heard. I know which ways I can learn, and I know what doesn't work for me. Please allow me to tell you what I can and can't do. This was a thoughtful middle school child who knew his learning style, but had experiences that were limiting to him because people told him what he needed and didn't give him the space to say what he felt he needed and what he felt worked for him. So, the one word I didn't have in these previous slides that should be there is listen. Listen to the kids. I'm really trying my best at school. It's sometimes hard for me to concentrate. I would do better if I could take tests in a quieter place where there aren't so many other kids. This was a younger child who was basically writing her own IEP, not realizing it. I like this one, and this is common for me to hear for all kinds of reasons. Give me a break from talking about school when I come home. Like you take a break from talking about work when you come home. School is like work for me. I thought that was insightful and very consistent with some of the fun that happens in my office between kids and parents about homework especially. And a young man who is now a senior at Unionville High School a couple of years ago told me this. And by the way, I also have a daughter who's a senior here at Unionville High School, one of the captains of the tennis team, doing very well, and I'm very proud of her. And one of her classmates was in my office this week and a couple of years ago told me this. This is a direct quote. Give your child who has a learning disability even more love than you'd give another child. Your child with a learning disability will need your extra love. I thought that was quite poignant coming from this young man who's struggled along the way, who's managed to overcome his learning disabilities and is applying for college now and hoping to get into his first choice within a couple of months. And he's not had an easy time, and he's not had an easy time with his parents, and this was his advice to all of you parents and to me. I thought that was very helpful. I couldn't have said that one better. That's what I've got, and I hope this has been helpful, and there's plenty of time to have a conversation and to answer any questions that you may have, and I hope this is meeting the need that you came for as parents and as teachers. I'm very honored that administrators and teachers and psychologists would show up to hear what I had to say, and always honored to have other fellow parents of special kids in the room with me, and honored to be at this particular school. I think I've been in this room a few times for IEP meetings. Yeah, it didn't feed me pizza then. Yeah. Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, fire away if you've got anything for me.
This group is never quiet. There we go.
Yeah, well, Jim, feel free to take a minute. If you want to take a minute and jot something down, I don't mean to put you all on the spot.
First question. You talked a lot about learning disabilities.
Yeah.
Is it okay, because kids have are in all different kind, they have all different kind of diagnoses. Let's just say, for example, ADHD.
Yeah.
Like my son is old enough to Google ADHD and find out more, so I'm afraid to tell him the exact word. Like, you have ADHD, that's why you can't do this. But he knows that.
He knows, yeah. Yeah,
So
he knows.
It's not that I feel like I'm hiding that, but it's not that he doesn't know it.
He's in first grade, right?
6.
I'm sorry, 6 you said. I'm sorry. I heard 6.
I wish I was normal. I wish I was like the other kids. So he knows it.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. 6th grade, he's old enough. If he was, I misheard you. If he was in 1st grade, I'd be advising you to talk to him about his ADHD by using words like wiggly for a little child. You're wiggly more than other kids your age, and there's a reason for that. A 6th grader can understand words like distractible. Your child is old enough to understand what ADHD is. He already knows he's got it, he just doesn't know what it's called and where it's coming from and what to do about it. So I think to talk with him about the fact, I don't know your son, but if whatever he has a hard time doing, to help to reassure him there's a reason for that, and then to talk with him about what can be done to help him with that. There's a whole separate conversation we could have outside the room about the answers to those questions, but 6th grade's old enough. Yeah, and kids want to know. I see a whole lot of kids with ADHD, and when it's not been diagnosed yet, they help me diagnose them by telling me about their experience. I have, the ADHD checklist you all said. I have them in my office. They're for parents and teachers to fill out. I sit with a child. 6th grade's not too young. I sit with a child and go through the checklist and say, how would you rate yourself? Is this hard for you? Tell me about it. And that they kind of paint a picture of themselves with that symptom checklist. And they say, yeah, that's me, or no, that's not me, or yeah, sometimes that's me. And that they like having that conversation. They like knowing they're not the only one who has this kind of challenge, and they like having a conversation with somebody who understands what this is about. So I would encourage you.
Yeah, my second question is that he has other diagnoses as well. I don't want him to go and start telling everybody, because he kind of starts telling everybody he's in a different program as soon as he gets in a room with different kids, like kids he never, I'm a pattern, but I'm in this program because I have this, and this, and I tell him not to, but I don't know how to deal with that issue.
He sounds more complicated than just one diagnosis. If he's unable to keep things private, so when you talk with your kids about medical stuff, it's your personal information. And some kids are disinhibited, some with ADHD, some with other conditions, and they don't know not to broadcast what they've been told. And if you're uncomfortable with them broadcasting what they're going to be told, then it's better not to tell them things that they will repeat if you don't want them to repeat it. I think it really depends on what the information is and how your son would be sharing it. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you when we're finished about his individual situation. It sounds a little trickier than just the ADD. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah.
So my daughter turned 5 at the beginning of the summer, and last year the alphabet, recognizing letters, she just didn't seem interested. Now that she's a little bit older, her pre-K teachers are mentioning that she's behind from her peers. At what age do you decipher whether it's because they're just not interested yet, or that it's a learning issue, a disability?
Is that a question for you guys?
And she's
You can go first.
she's evaluated soon for speech.
Yeah.
because she clearly is having difficulty with speech
Yeah.
articulation, but other than that, there hasn't nothing concrete has been kind of a red flag.
I see. So she's a child in the school district, right? And she's
But she's in a pre-K. She's not in kindergarten yet.
Oh, I see.
So she's just.
So that would.
She was a young.
I see.
And so they thought, well, let's do pre-K. She's not ready for kindergarten, but now I'm wondering if it was not because she wasn't ready, but because she has a learning disability.
Got it.
Or the beginnings.
Got it. So my first question would be, does your child's teacher have a concern about how she's progressing? And if your child's teacher, who's seen a lot of kids your child's age, has a concern, then it would be a reason to consider a screening. If she's not here in the district yet, then that would be an early intervention. The early intervention program would offer that type of screening to yield information to answer that question, and that information would come with her here to the school district when she came to kindergarten. Right? Okay, good. Good.
So would it be better to not, until we get that evaluation done, to not really push trying to recognize letters? Because I work with her almost every night, just a reading time, casual. Can you point out the letter D to me before we start a book? That's really open book.
Yeah.
And she's very resistant because she gets frustrated that she can't.
I see.
I
Again,
don't want her to not enjoy learning or reading a book.
of course not.
I also don't want to not try to practice
Sure.
recognition.
Sure. Well, When in doubt, read to your child. You can't go wrong. Read to her. To answer your question, I don't know your child, but your child's teacher knows your child and other kids like your child, her age. So I would work with the teacher. I would pose the same questions to somebody who knows her well. I wouldn't want to guess wrong. And see how your teacher can help guide you. Teachers are valuable resources. You spend 180 days in a classroom with a child, you really get to know them. I did when I was a classroom teacher, and I would use the folks who know her to help you with that.
That this is an age where they could probably, because she was with the same teachers last year that she is this year.
Even better,
This
they
is
know
an
her.
age where you can tell the difference between motivation versus.
Reading's tricky at that age.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
They said they just felt like she wasn't interested.
there's a lot of
What did they-
There's a lot of gray area there at that age. And I can tell you that I had second graders who weren't reading in the beginning of second grade. And then the light bulb went on and bam, they just caught up with everybody else. So it's not easy to be sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess this isn't really a question, but an observation. My son has autism, and so for the IEP meeting, I would always share with him what his symptoms were that we were addressing in the IEP, and he would understand that because he understood that those specific items were difficulties for him.
Yeah.
But with autism, it's a group of symptoms that could be vary from child to child.
Yes.
And the school sort of forces your hand to call it autism by having autistic support. And you don't really have a choice about using that umbrella term
Mm-hmm.
with your child.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than discussing it in a way that seems more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Autism is incurable, permanent, there's a stigma,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been a struggle for me. And, he has to understand he has autism because the school uses that term for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he also knows that he doesn't necessarily look like his peers in the autistic program. So I think that's problematic around
Mm-hmm.
autism.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate your observation. I think to qualify for services, the schools have to have a name, have a diagnosis in order to formally offer the services. That's a system thing, right? In the interaction with children, and autism, it's a spectrum disorder. That's why they call it that. You can have a little of it, you can have a lot of it. It would be nice to be able to use a different term if the child isn't ready to hear that, or the parents aren't ready to hear their child hear that. Special needs would be a term that would be a softer term than autism. I don't know how possible it would be to improvise in those situations, but I think that's a fair observation about autism, and I guess about any disability. But autism is complicated in a different way.
I have a comment. One thing I think that the medical community did that had hurt a lot of people with autism was to lump everything together instead of reading it as PDD, Asperger's, high functioning, low functioning. They did a big disservice saying we're just going to call it all autism.
Obviously, it's poorly understood
And
Yeah.
and it's evolving.
yeah,
But I think right now, it doesn't really serve a kid to hear they have autism because that doesn't mean anything actionable.
Yeah, yeah. I got it. Yeah, the new DSM-5, the diagnostic criteria for different medical conditions was updated from 4, and they've taken those different types of conditions and put them all under one umbrella, which is why that word would come out more explicitly and more often in meetings.
whereas if you have an Asperger's child who doesn't have danger with C or
Yeah. Now, one thought I have is when I had IEP meetings here with Jack, there were meetings as a parent. There was meetings when Jack was part of the time, but not all of the time. So there could be a way to structure, and that helped for all kinds of different reasons. There can be ways to structure IP meetings so that the adults are talking separate from the child, and another part where the child's included, but included in a customized way. Say, that's what we did. Yeah. Yes.
During the first questions that have been raised and comments, that leads me to another question and a bit of a concern. So I've got two boys that are on the spectrum, and my eldest one is a junior here and is not private at all. We've never pushed him to be specifically private about him being on the spectrum. So when he was diagnosed, the word used was Asperger. Now the word used is autistic
High functioning.
right?
Yeah.
So whatever you use, it's still a form of autism, and he's not keeping specifically quiet about it. I would not say that he is almost proud of it, but he tends to go into the room and say, "Okay, guys, you may not like the way I function, but I'd rather tell you straight away it's because I'm like that. And it's because I'm on the spectrum. So if I'm a bit rude to you, I apologize in advance. I can't help it." Sometimes he uses a bit too much, I think, all the more when he doesn't do his homework. But you were with me a bit earlier when you had said this lady to keep it private, because actually what made him more comfortable in life and at school is
Yeah.
because he was obviously different, and at some point he could raise his flag and say, "Oh, okay, now I know why I'm different. I'm different, and here is the flag. I'm on the spectrum,
Yeah.
so you have to get on with
Yeah.
it, guys." So is it a bad thing? I mean,
No, I'm sorry to have confused you. My comment was more, Mom back there, was if you're concerned as a parent about what your child's saying, and your child is disinhibited and can't keep information that you want him to keep private, that's different. You're saying, and I've met many high-functioning autistic children and adults who are very mature about how they present themselves, and you are comfortable with that, and it's working well for him, then no, I think that's helpful and constructive and mature of him. And yeah, sorry to confuse you with the other comment.
and because the college time is coming,
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe we should have kept it a bit more quiet, because maybe it's the time to pretend he's not.
Well,
It's late because he comes with like an aura of it, So, well,
yeah, we all strive to be comfortable with who we are, and that's what he's doing. And if he's comfortable with who he is and he knows how to handle himself, more power to him. Yeah, and everybody's different. And again, autistic spectrum is a spectrum. Everybody's different, and you can have a mild version, and I've got a couple of kids who have that diagnosis of autism in my office now, and I wouldn't have known had they not told me. Very mild. So there's a wide spectrum. Yes, sir.
I got two questions. One is siblings. So,
Mm-hmm.
two young grandchildren. One of them has an IEP, and one doesn't really understand what's going on. They're in elementary school. Kids they don't understand that much. Do you have any advice for parents how to explain, like even when you said like, one person said, give me extra love, sometimes we do get extra attention. So how do you cope with the other siblings?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing that my last 20 years. Oh, 17. My daughter's 17. With a younger child and a less visible disability than my son has, I'd suggest you first, is your grandchildren, you said? You go to your grandchild who has a disability and see that he or she's comfortable having information about them shared with the sibling, or suggest I'd like to talk to your brother about this because he's confused about why you need X, Y, and Z, and he doesn't. And if you make that suggestion, it will usually work. Get permission first, essentially, and helping the sibling to understand why. Same thing. There's a demystification process here. It doesn't make logical sense to kids when one needs more attention than the other for reasons that don't make sense to the sibling because they don't need that attention. When that's demystified for them, it helps. It helps to have them understand. And there's a unfairness about it that kids feel. My daughter certainly has. That is real and sometimes not fixable. You know, one child needs more time than the other child, and that's the way it is. And to my daughter's credit, she's become a very patient, self-sufficient, independent young woman, in part because she's needed to be, and another part of her is frustrated because her brother can't be left alone for a second, and the world revolves around his care because it's so complicated. So thank you for the question, because siblings are directly affected by kids' disabilities and differences. Be open about it and supportive to the sibling, and try to find one-on-one time for the siblings as much as possible so that they don't feel shortchanged. That extra time you allocate to the sibling who's not needing special attention all the time will go a long way to helping even things out, so to speak. I always look for any opportunity to spend one-on-one time with my daughter for that very reason. Now it's flipped around. She can drive a car, so now she's fitting me into her schedule. But she still appreciates when I offer, even though she's tied up with her friends and her tennis team now. I hope that helps.
And then I think, like you said before, they're young, so it's
They're young, yeah.
the bottom of it, but it's starting to realize what's wrong with yourself.
Yeah.
The other question I had, actually no, I asked it, but it's along the lines of the folks in this room are many of them getting support from the district through special education, and I think we have a good program to do that, and we know how to do that. I'm sometimes trying to figure out from my role from the district office and as an administrator, what do parents with special education students need from us? What do, beyond just the supports? I don't always know how to talk to a parent with special needs. I kind of go by whatever they're telling me and respond to that. That seems appropriate, but it seems like there are other things, other emotional needs that parents need, and maybe there's something that we can do to provide more help. You've been through it, and you have expertise on it, and I just thought maybe you could share.
Sure, I'll give it a shot. I'm curious about what's your role here in the district.
I'm responsible for communications.
Oh.
I work in the district office. My name is Dave Liskman.
Oh, hi, Dave. Yeah, I've communicated with you. Yeah. Yeah.
Then he's doing his job.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice to put a face to all those emails and yeah.
Sorry, Dave, you weren't here when we did introductions earlier.
No, I came in late.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because the first word that came to mind as you were asking your question was communication. But I'd love to, there are other parents in the room. Anybody want to take a shot at that? Just before I do, parents? What do we parents need from administrators in the school district to support us as we're working together in support of our kids? Anybody want to help Dave with that one?
I can just say from my experience, it was not through the school district, but it would be a suggestion if it's not already being done, so it might be. So my son was diagnosed on the spectrum when he was 3 years old, and they'd done the evaluation, and then you have a meeting where they tell you the findings, and they said we'll start start him with speech therapy, physical therapy, and occupational therapy. But I think the biggest piece that he was struggling with, which was actually what brought the evaluations to start with, was the fact that he wasn't social and he couldn't interact with peers. And that was, for a child on the spectrum, was pretty common. And for that piece of it, I wasn't given any suggestions or support or guidance on how to help him in that area, because for the next 2 years, that was the area where he struggled the most, and that's what caused problems in school. And he would meet goals in speech and OT and PT, but he was isolated in school because of the communication. So for a parent with a child on the spectrum, just whether it's suggesting a website or a support group or just anything, usually they have, now I know that you can call and they'll send you a list of things. At least I found that when I moved here. But, and where we were living at the time, I wasn't given anything. I thought, okay, a child with autism spectrum disorder, and he's going to get services. And I just felt like I wish I would have done more for him, and I felt guilty as a parent because he wasn't doing well in life. He was doing better in speech and PT and OT, but his life experience was not great. So I felt put that guilt on myself.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish I would have done more. Maybe if I would have reached out to them more, they probably would have given me that. But if I would have given that information at the time of diagnosis, it would have helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you might already do that, but
Yeah, when you have a kid with special needs, you feel by yourself in the situation initially. So you're asking the wrong guy here, Dave, because I'm such a satisfied customer after all these years. The school district did everything that Jack needed for so long that I can't think of more they could have done in my situation for my son. But at the beginning, when you're alone with your child and trying to make sense of it, it is a huge help when people in a community reach out to include you, support you, and make you not feel alone. And so communication about your child helps you to feel like there are other people here who are here to help you when you feel by yourself. That's the seed that then germinates to everything else that followed for my son.
And that's kind of why we started U-PRISE, to have a parent support group. And we run the community resources page with all the sibling, parent, even a grandparent support group I just posted the other day that was shared with me. So certainly that's one place to look for resources. And we have the school parent liaison, so you can reach out to parents in your building. And we try and foster connections with parents in similar programs across different buildings. So certainly use this as an outlet for that and a resource for that. But that's sort of how one of the reasons why we came about.
Yeah.
Provide resources
Yeah.
to families.
Yeah. This is great. It's new.
Yes, maybe one thing that could be helpful is that the price information is embedded into the rest of the communication. And I think that it would benefit that sometimes some communications will come out to the community, to all the parents, just for a price, so that the parents who are hesitating because they feel that their child maybe has something, but lots of parents are very worried about the stigma of the label. I've heard so many parents say, oh, my child has a problem with his teacher this year, he doesn't learn anything, things are not going well, but they would not want to go. And when you talk to them, you realize that the problems have been there for a while, so maybe there's more than just a problem with the teacher, but maybe there's a learning disability. And the parents are so worried about having a label like autism or ADHD or dyslexia or whatever label, they don't want to go for a more profound research on what's going on with their kid, and they isolate themselves and their child might have problems. So maybe once in a while communicate just on the fact that there is a price, there are some parents with kids that are a bit different, and we don't have a problem existing and having kids that are different, and we're an open community, and we may or 504 and see what's going on, and maybe that will entice them into starting a process that will help their kids. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'd say in my work, the average length of time between when a family could have, should have, might have called about the problem that was emerging and when they do call, 18 months to 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. So it takes a lot for parents to pick up the phone and call a psychologist and say, I have a problem and I'm going to come in and talk about it and pay you money to talk about it. That's a big jump. So same thing with school special education services. It's not easy for parents, one, to recognize the need, and then two, once they sense a need, to want to know what it is and to pursue it. It's hard. It's hard.
And sometimes they don't want the school to know.
And some right.
Because it's like going to the police and
Yeah.
all the police report.
Yeah.
It's the feelings that people have. They are
Yeah.
making a case for their kids that will follow the kids
Yeah.
forever. I've heard that. People say, no, I'm not going to say anybody but the school psychologist, which I find very difficult because that's exactly where I'm going to have some help.
Yeah. Yeah, I got you. But where I started was the child knows. Child knows. Yes.
Just one thing when I think about Dave's question about what the district could do better, and it's not necessarily a criticism, but I feel like I've worked with a lot of parents whose kids are newly diagnosed with whatever and help them through the IEP process. There is nothing worse than being a parent who has a newly diagnosed child and going to an IEP meeting, having all these people sitting
Yeah.
across from you telling you about your child, and I think parents don't always realize that it is supposed to be teamwork. They don't understand that it's not just the teachers, that granted the teachers know a lot about your child, but the parent is the expert, and so
Yeah.
they really have to work together. And I think parents feel like when their child's newly diagnosed, they don't understand the IEP process.
Right.
There's acronym after acronym and page after page and boxes to check. And I think I've worked personally with a lot of families, teaching them the process and helping them so that when they go to the meeting, they understand and they know that they can take part in the meeting. Even getting a draft of the IEP 24 hours in advance so that a parent can take that in and emotionally respond to it, understand, jot down questions, because you get in a meeting and it's all these people sitting here and everybody's on a schedule. Teachers got to get back to class, and it's not a great feeling for a
Yeah.
parent, especially as someone who's still learning about their child's needs and
Yeah.
difficulties. So I think having an education, which I think this group does do, but having an education process for the parents so that they can understand the process and feel informed and feel like a part of the meeting.
Yeah.
Rather than going in and having all these people just telling you about your child. It's overwhelming.
Just to managing, you're dealing with the emotions of it,
Yeah.
and you're dealing with a whole new set of facts in a program, and it's your first, it's just so much to do.
Yeah. I think, and this, I grabbed this book when I saw it, this booklet, it's on the table. I've been giving this out in my office to parents for years. It's a very helpful guide, kind of written in understandable English for parents about special education services, which includes information about IEP meetings. And it is hard when you're new at this, a newly diagnosed child, new IEP, to know what to expect. And it's a system that the schools are required to follow by law, and they're following by law in order to serve the children, but it's not familiar to parents who are new at it. So, yeah, any opportunities there are to help preview for parents what that's going to be like are helpful. And yeah, it is hard and sometimes unavoidable, and it's a good thing when a lot of people are in the room, because there are a lot of people who care about your kid and are going to help your kid, but when you're new at it, it can be intimidating when you're new at it, not knowing that's going to come. There are always, back to Dave's question, and it looks like we're up against the clock here. I appreciate your question, Dave, and all schools and all school districts have room for improvement. This is imperfect science, working with kids, whether they have special needs or not. And to answer your question in terms of my personal experience, in a way it's hard for me to answer because everything went so well despite the complex challenge my son was for the school district. But I'd start with what went well was communication, teamwork. People, my son wouldn't have had a chance to succeed here unless the adults who were working with him worked together. And unless the adults who are working here included mom and dad and others who work with my son, and wouldn't have had success without communication, and wouldn't have had success without being open to creative solutions to complicated problems. And that's what I saw happen over the years, to the point at which I was a negligent parent. These guys don't know this. I stopped reading the IEPs because I trusted them so much. I don't know, by the time it was like 8th grade, I was like, do I really have to read this again? Because I trusted them all so much, because things were taken care of by the people who knew my son and cared about him. And lastly, I'd say the school district always gave me a sense as a dad that my son was part of the community and was adding something of value to the community. They didn't view him as a burden to the community. They viewed him as a gift to the community, and they were proud of his successes as he worked through the system here. So that's worth more than money and anything that you can put in an IEP. And if all of us who work with kids do those things, then it's only going to help them while we're dealing with significant challenges and imperfect systems. So I hope that helps. Time to wind us up at 7:30, and such an honor to be here in this school district, and I appreciate your time. And if I can be of help to any of you, formally or informally, don't hesitate to ask. My email's on the handouts and on the cards out there, and I'll be here for a few minutes if you want to talk afterward. Thank you so much for having me.